This review is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel for the JOJOLands Chapter 2 review titled The Japanese Person on the Island of Hawaii, referring to the cliffhanger from the end of the last chapter where Jodio and the gang were tasked to steal an expensive diamond from a Japanese tourist. And like the rest of the community, I had plenty of my predictions for who this character may be. Really excited to see someone returning from JOJOLand. As we discussed in the last review, possibly Josuke, Yasuo, Joshu, or even Tsurugi. Just some reasonable guesses that could, make sense. But for who this Japanese tourist is, it is revealed by the end of the chapter, and to everyone's surprise, turned out to be one of the most unexpected and somehow confusing character reveals in the entire series. But before then, we have yet another banger of a chapter to unpack this month, full of crime, delinquency, that good old JoJo camaraderie, and of course, Jodio mobile gaming, truly earning that title of our first Zoomer JoJo. And I wonder what type of games Jodio plays. Probably one with an incredibly vast selection of awesome champions, intense PvE and PvP content with rich RPG mechanics and stunning graphics. Sounds like a pretty great game, right? Well, then Jodio must be playing Raid Shadow Legends, the sponsor of today's video. It's the game you've all heard about or seen before, but for whatever reason just haven't given it a try yet. So how about I just spell it out for you? Literally. R standing for the game's regular updates, as the team behind Raid is constantly working on new content, events, champions, and in-game modes to always keep the gameplay fresh and exciting. A stands for Arena Mode, where you can test your champions against other players in intense PvP content for high stakes. I standing for, of course, the game's incredible graphics and character designs, with a great attention to detail in every aspect of the game. And last but not least, we have D, which obviously stands for Doom Tower Mode. Pretty cool name, right? This is where you can face off against some of the toughest challenges in the game and earn some of the best rewards. So now, if that wasn't enough, Raid is also celebrating its 4th anniversary with tons of free gifts and promotions for new players, including a brand new fusion event where you can get your hands on an anniversary-themed legendary champion. And right now, you can use promo code 4YearsRaid to get 4 skill tomes legendary, 4 energy refills, 400 energy, and 400,000 silver. And for Amazon Prime members who just got the champion Genbo, keep an eye out in your next drop for some powerful Savage gear available until March 30th. But of course, because Raid always goes above and beyond, there is more, and new players who use my link in the description or scan the QR code right here will receive a free starter pack with all of this cool in-game loot you see now. So don't wait any longer, just try it already using my link in the description and start your adventure today. So back in the JoJoLands, this chapter kicks off on South King Street, Oahu, with a woman riding a bike and some scenery of the island in the background, as we can see the King Kamehameha statue, and behind it is the Ali'iolani Hale building, I think I said that right, which is currently used as the home of Hawaii's State Supreme Court, possibly foreshadowing this woman's role later in the chapter, being associated with the criminal justice system, which also connects this first scene to a certain reference Araki is clearly making here, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So this first scene, taking place sometime after the events of the first half of the last chapter, depicts a woman trying to buy drugs from Jodio, although Jodio skeptically refuses because he thinks she's a fed, and that she's not even trying to be subtle, saying how her helmet and bike looks like it has a camera and microphone attached to it, and that he bets she's working with the ice cream truck across from them too. So the woman proposes an idea to Jodio, saying that officers can't lie, and when they're doing an undercover investigation, if they were to lie in order to obtain evidence, it would be thrown out in a court of law. So the woman tells Jodio to simply ask her if she's a police officer, and if she says no, that would clear her of any suspicion. But when she says no and buys the drugs from Jodio and Paco, she immediately pulls out a gun, revealing herself as Honolulu Police, and the two are swarmed by officers and DEA agents. So this is already a hilarious scene in terms of timing, Jodio's naivety, and just everyone's facial expressions. But if you've seen Breaking Bad, it's even funnier, as this is 100% unmistakably a reference to Breaking Bad. Specifically the scene in the later half of season 2 when Badger deals meth to an undercover cop and is arrested. I won't explain the whole scene, as it's literally exactly the same as the one from this chapter, beat for beat, nearly word for word. So if you haven't seen Breaking Bad, I'll link the Badger scene in the description and you can watch it and see for yourself. And don't worry, there really isn't any spoilers in that video, but definitely go watch Breaking Bad 2 if you haven't already, and then all of Better Call Saul after that, and just thank me later. So the JoJoLands already came out swinging with its its premiere, and now a Breaking Bad reference in chapter 2? It's just too good, man. And seeing this influence kinda gives us an idea of where Araki's mind is for this part, as if I had to guess, I would say that Araki watched Breaking Bad during his break in between parts 8 and 9, or while he was writing part 8. As in the past, Araki has been really true to his philosophy that morally ethical characters evoke empathy, and his protagonists always carry a strong innate sense of justice no matter the circumstance. I would even say that JoJo has never had anything close to an anti-hero before. Sure, Jotaro can be mean sometimes, and Giorno is the kingpin of the Italian mafia, but themselves as characters and their actions do not fulfill the role of an anti-hero. No JoJo, even Johnny, has ever reached the moral dissonance of, say, a Tony Soprano or Walter White type character. And I can see why, because it's extremely hard to do in manga and unlike anything Araki has done before, as these are characters that at a certain point the audience will genuinely despise, but you need to strike a balance so the reader doesn't lose interest or begin to lack empathy for the protagonist. So through Jodio, it's clear that Araki is diverging slightly from his Royal Road philosophy of manga, and possibly because of different influences is exploring the anti-hero through Jodio, or just for the sake of trying something entirely new for the series. I mean, come on, he's referencing Breaking Bad here, a story about humanizing criminals, specifically drug dealers and manufacturers, which pushes the audience's idea of justice to its absolute limits. And this new protagonist just so happens to be a drug dealer, something we never would have seen from Araki 10 years ago, as the concept of the anti-hero has only really become normalized and even celebrated in media within the past 20 years. And especially from Araki's generation and his influences growing up, if you would have pitched a drug-dealing psychopath as your protagonist with a motivation to become filthy rich to any manga magazine, you'd be laughed out of the building. So looking at Araki's thoughts on moral characters and motivations from just 2015, he's clearly opened up more to the idea of immoral motivations. Here's a quote from his book, Manga in Theory and Practice. "In order to gain empathy of readers, you need agreeable motivations that conform to their natural sense of ethics. For example, if the motivation is a desire for wealth, you need to work it so that rather than being a simple robber, the character needs money in order to save someone." But here we have Jodio in 2023. Granted, his motivation of wealth and mechanisms has yet to been clearly defined. What we know now is that he participates in petty crime and thievery just for money. Sure, his mother is also taken care of well because of his status, but let's not act like she's dying of some illness and Jodio is doing this all for her. He's just a kid dealing drugs and stealing from tourists, but it's written in a way that doesn't take its themes too serious and gives him an innocent naivety, so we don't judge him for his actions, as I doubt even he thinks what he's doing is wrong. And from his interactions with authorities who sexually abuse him and his brother and lie to him, I can't blame him for wanting to be on the opposite side of that. And from what we've seen from Jodio in just these 2 chapters, it's clear that Araki is writing this character in a way that is going to have more empathy from readers, as he's only 15 years old and now in this chapter he's diagnosed with a mental illness. So if Jodio was, say, 19 years old and in perfectly well state of mind and he was still doing these bad things, the reader probably wouldn't care about him or might judge him as an awful person. But Jodio is younger, he has some issues in his head, and he just isn't all there. He's kind of fucked up, as his name would imply, being Jodio. So we have a bit of more empathy towards him to where he's put in these situations where he might not understand what he's doing is wrong. Or, you know, maybe he does understand what he's doing is wrong and he just doesn't give a shit because he is, of course, Jodio. But continuing on in the chapter, and speaking of Jodio getting screwed over by the cops, at this drug bust is the cops from the first chapter who make some pretty disgusting remarks to Jodio about him and his brother, as he once again activates November Rain to do something, as in the first chapter his raindrops were extremely heavy, but now they are just kinda heavy, as they make small dents in the officer's shoes and they fall to the ground, but not because the rain is forcing them, more like they're having a post-traumatic stress response from Jodio's first attack, as it seems all the rain did was destroy the evidence and probably the camera that was recording him too, although that was never clearly shown, so maybe at some point Jodio and the gang will have to get themselves a criminal lawyer, if you know what I mean. As I would absolutely love a Saul Goodman-esque character in the mix, and since we already have some Breaking Bad influence and a reference in this chapter, I wouldn't count it out. So this scene ends with Jodio still in handcuffs and on the ground, so I don't think this is the same day as the second half of the chapter, which is the heist, and as we'll see, Jodio isn't even on the island of Oahu. So the timeline for these 2 chapters is a bit scattered, as this scene that we just covered is is a continuation of the first half of the first chapter, where Jodio and Dragona fought off these cops. But the second half of this chapter is connected to the second half of the first chapter. So I'm not sure if Jodio getting arrested here comes before or after the current timeline. So we'll just have to wait and see how they connect. Following this scene is something completely unrelated, as Jodio takes over as our narrator and tells us a little bit more about himself and about how he had to take a psychological test for school and that he most likely has antisocial personality disorder, or in other words, he's a psychopath. There's a chance I have antisocial personality disorder. In other words, I'm a yeah, he's fucking Dio, alright. In other words, I'm a psychopath. Which shouldn't be as funny as it is, but he is Jodio, so I guess it makes sense. And coming back to what I just mentioned, this seems to be more of Araki fully diving into a truly unhinged protagonist, who will try to capture readers' empathy with a personality and motivation devoid of a hero's typical ethics. The chapter then transitions into a new scene where the main cast have all flown from Oahu to the main island of Hawaii, where they plan to steal the diamonds. So right now, this scene is a continuation of where the last chapter left off. And we finally learn the name of the swimsuit guy, who is Osagi Aloha Oe, whose last name is in reference to a very old popular Hawaiian folk song typically played on the ukulele, and he is also wearing a hat now, so it looks like he has a slight design change unless he's just wearing it for this trip. So the rest of the chapter leading up to the actual heist is the main cast exchanging some friendly banter as they argue a bit, rent a car, and during their drive, Araki provides some beautiful landscapes of the main island Hawaii and a look at some of the distinct Hawaiian foliage. But upon arriving at the villas, we get a look at Usagi's stand ability, the Mate Kudasai, whose name is in reference to the King Crimson song of the same name. So since so far Part 9 shares many themes with Golden Wind, it's cool to see another reference from King Crimson, which is of course the stand's name of Part 5's main antagonist, Diavolo. So what we actually see the Mate Kudasai do is really strange, as the stand can only activate when someone other than its user wishes to have a desire fulfilled, as Usagi instructs Dragona to ask for the camera, and when he says, "I want the camera," the stand activates, appearing from Usagi's palm and clumsily run towards the camera, which then duplicates the object in a similar fashion to say Kiss from Stone Ocean, and now the duplicated camera records an altered or distorted version of reality where the footage is flipped and the characters' appearances are slightly altered, changing their faces and clothes. So the logic behind the use of the stand here is that if the security camera footage is used as evidence, because there is now two versions, there will be no way to figure out which one is fake, so it can't be used as proof in, say, a court of law. Which I guess makes sense, as if nothing else it will surely confuse law enforcement, but there still exists the left camera completely unaltered. So couldn't the cops just ignore the altered camera and throw away that footage if they really wanted to convict the group? So I'm just not sure if this was the best move in this situation, although we still don't really know what the stand does and how its ability could be applied to other things than just a camera, but it just seems like a way safer bet to use November Rain or smooth operators to obstruct the cameras, or hell, just break the damn things. I'd feel much safer as a suspect knowing that there is no video evidence rather than two versions of evidence, one being completely unaltered, especially in Hawaii since apparently most of these cops are terrible people too. So I guess what Araki's getting at is that if this evidence was ever used in a court of law and these characters actually went to trial, it would eventually get thrown out because of conflicting evidence. So in this situation, at least to me, the Mate Kudasai seems like it's more trouble than it's worth, as even if the evidence can't be used to convict them, doesn't it still place them at the scene of the crime and build a case against them? I don't know, but this again is a very specific use that doesn't really show us what the stand is fully capable of yet, or how else it can be used, but so far, it looks to be a nice utility stand that can help out our main cast. And now that we have seen all of these characters' stands, the one theme I have noticed is that they're all very well suited for crime, except maybe Jodio, whose November Rain we still don't really know the mechanics of and how it operates, but the Hustle, Smooth Operators, and now the Mate Kudasai are all very well suited to deceive people and steal. So I would love for this part to continue as a sort of crime comedy, with each minor villain fight being a new job or heist, or maybe some arcs not even having stand battles, but just these characters using their stands as tools to pull off jobs. So after we see the new stand, the camera is finally taken care of and we can get to the reveal of the Japanese tourist, as Jodio gets a closer look at the character from outside of the villa's gate and we see a man with long hair swimming in the pool. And then surprisingly, Jodio says he knows who the man is. He's famous and Jodio owns some of his books and sees his anime online all the time. And right when Jodio said that, I dreaded what was coming, as it's revealed that the Japanese tourist is none other than Rohan Kishibe, which completely shatters everything I thought I knew about JoJo and the alternate universe. Oh my god, we see him. Who the fuck is this? Who the fuck is this dude? My heart just raced. Okay, so it's a guy. Dude, is this Josuke's hair? Who wears these? Who wears the wristband? Long hair, who is this? They look like a Chad. I know who he is, he's famous. Oh, is it Rohan? Is it fucking Rohan? Oh my god. It looks like Rohan's hair. I know who he is, he's famous. I've got some books by him at home. I see his anime online all the time. He's holding in his villa on his own. It's fucking Rohan, are you kidding me, dude?
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
Oh my god. Dude, no way, dude. That mangaka fucking Rohan Kishibe. We can't escape him. We can't escape Rohan. Oh my god. It's funny, but I also hate it. Fuck you, Rohan. I hate you. Jesus, get off my screen right now. Get out of my manga. Never once has there been a character from the alternate universe that's like exactly the same. But no, of course, Rohan is still exactly the same. I'm pissed. I'm pissed. Me over here being like, is that Josuke? Is it Joshu? Araki knew it too. He knew that we were gonna be doing that shit, being like, oh my god, it's gonna be a character from JoJoLands, but it's fucking Rohan. So Rohan has somehow weaseled his way into the alternate universe. But how is this possible, and why did Araki bring a character synonymous with part 4 back in part 9? But first, I gotta call Araki out and share a quote from him back in 2013 at the release of the game All-Star Battle, where Araki had said, "From here on out in JOJOLands, I plan to focus on the Higashikata family in more detail, but it won't be linked to part 4 in any way. People keep asking me when Rohan Kishibe will appear, so let me answer that question. He won't. That is absolutely set in stone. Another weird mangaka might appear though."
So that was a fucking lie.
So I guess Araki just couldn't keep himself away from this character and changed his mind. But what's most confusing is that this appears to be the exact same Rohan from the original universe and the Thus Spoke Rohan Kishibe series. He has the same name and looks exactly the same, something we've never seen before in the alternate universe. And I doubt the plot will ever explain this or go into any Rohan universe hopping, as at this point in the series, Rohan is more of a running gag with how obsessed Araki is with his character being a clear self-insert, even though he says he isn't. But if I had to guess, I would say that this is the same Rohan from some of the Thus Spoke Rohan Kishibe episodes, as that Rohan seems to exist outside of the series in a way, or just in his own weird continuity, as the storyline continues to move forward and time passes, but he never visibly ages. And in the story Hot Martha Summer, Rohan had vented a lot of his frustration about being stuck in the house and not being able to travel, so now that the JOJOLands takes place around 2023, this could be that same Rohan taking a trip after being locked inside for a few years, but who knows why he has that expensive diamond with him too. Maybe he's in the middle of one of his Thus Spoke adventures and we are just catching him in the middle, like a Thus Spoke Rohan JOJOLands crossover episode. But I just find it strange that Araki chooses to bring back Rohan right after part 8. So like, during all of JOJOLands, was Rohan just living in Morio and we never saw him and he doesn't have any of his old friends anymore? But if you remember, in the earlier Thus Spoke Rohan stories, we had seen Josuke, Okuyasu, Koichi, and even Tonio. But now that I think about it, they did look slightly different, so maybe they were actually alternate universe equivalents. But realistically, Araki probably didn't plan that far ahead. So what I do think is possible is that while we are under the assumption that all of the Thus Spoke Rohan Kishibe stories took place within the same universe and it was the same Rohan, it is possible that some of the stories are an alternate Rohan, which would explain why in the years like 2020, he looks even younger than he did in 1999 in part 4 and hasn't really aged at all. Or again, Araki could just never address this, and it could just be one of those Rohan mysteries and just more of a gag within the series. So while I would have loved to see a returning character from JOJOLands, I guess I'll have to settle for Rohan Kishibe, as in a way this is even more interesting because he is the same character, and just see how this is going to work and how he behaves and if he truly is the same Rohan, and how the story goes forward from here. I doubt Rohan will be a reoccurring cast member. He could possibly teach Jodio a lesson, something about mechanisms that moves the plot forward, then Rohan kicks their asses and turns them all into books, and is on his merry way back to Japan. So definitely quite the twist this month from Araki. So thank you all so much for watching. Really appreciate it. Like the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to see more future JoJoLands and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure content. And I'll see you all next month for Chapter 3 of the JoJoLands.